There's an audience for everything. So whatever it is that you do it. You lean into it, you be persistent, and you be consistent with it. And eventually time will give you that success that you're looking for. I'm Tic2daToc. My real name is Dominic Bazil. I've been a producer since probably the early 90s, learning the MPC 3000, 4000 are the ones that I learned on. But I'm also a multi-instrumentalist, so my main instrument is saxophone. And then I just kind of graduated from there, applying what I knew from there to other instruments like the flute and the clarinet. Eventually, keyboards, I learned keyboards, and all kind of self-taught. And then I just kind of applied that to learning the bass guitar, and then eventually the guitar. And then pretty much at this stage, that's whatever instrument I pick up, I can kind of learn and adapt and just kind of feel my way around it. And basically, I just hack at it. So I just put my 10,000 hours in and then kind of learn and try to master each instrument. That's how I got to be a multi-instrumentalist. And then looking at people like Quincy Jones has been an inspiration to me as a producer. And so that inspired me to get into film composition and that sort of thing. And so I did graduate from college with a music composition degree after studying computer science, which I flip-flopped. Anyway, those were my two passions. But anyway, I ended up in music composition, got a degree in music composition, worked as a composer-producer, landing some record placements as well as some sync placements like with Warner Chappell and that sort of thing. I didn't get into content creation until really kind of COVID happened, because it was like a way for me to interact with people while we were all kind of locked down or what have you. And so that's when I started creating content and like just putting things out there for people to consume, because there wasn't a lot going on. I fought that model for so long. I was like, I'm not putting my beats up online for people to buy at this, like, whatever rate or whatever. I looked at all the ones that were making a difference in that space and said, okay, this is actually viable. And I just started on BeatStars that way and creating content to kind of support the BeatStars, my BeatStars store. That really helped a lot, to be honest, being able to drive traffic from the content people were consuming that I was creating to my BeatStars store, what have you. That really made a difference. I always say one of my biggest influences is going to be my oldest brother. So he influenced me to play the saxophone. He became a DJ. I don't DJ. I can't DJ anything. So don't ask me to get behind the turntables, because I could press a button, but that's about it. But anyway, he was a DJ and he became a producer as well in the New Orleans area. So he was producing local acts around New Orleans with the SR10 and, some of those machines back then. And so he kind of inspired me because I was interested in music production, inspired by Quincy Jones. He inspired me to get into beat making using the ASR and MPC. And he actually worked with No Limit Records. So he was part of the original Beats by the Pound, along with DJ KLC and Moby Dick and Odell. So I kind of came up under their tutelage as a beat maker and a producer. So that's kind of how I got my first introduction into beat making, was with Beats by the Pound. And I did make beats with them, and I did cut some records. Like my first engineering sessions were cutting vocals on Mystical. So imagine me trying to learn how to work ADAT recording machine, and he's got his, rapid fire flow. And I'm like praying that I don't miss a word, while learning the whole process at the same time. So that was a great learning experience coming up under Beats by the Pound. I did work on a few No Limit records. Fiend, Street Life was one that you'll find some credits that I did on there. And then some of the later albums as well, just kind of being an in-house musician. So definitely being a musician that had a skill set, saxophone and keys and all these other instruments. Mystical used to call me Mr. Instruments. Having that sort of skill set gets you in a room where you can advance to being an engineer and learning how to do production and work at MPC and that sort of thing. So yeah. The way they worked back then was kind of different. It was in Baton Rouge, and like with major artists like Mystical or Snoop was on at one point, and in Fiend, they had Silk the Shocker. Sometimes it was just a producer and, you know, the artist or whatever have you, or just the engineer and the artist, whatever. It was never really like any huge sessions or whatever. But a lot of times my most memorable moments were with the rest of the team, because the way that team worked, it was like so collaborative. So it was like you'll have KLC just start with a beat, and Odell might come with some keys, and then Moby Dick might come with a little lead synth Moog line or what have you. And it was really collaborative. And like, hey, Tic, you know, they call me Tic2daToc. Tic, come play some sax on here or some guitar or something like that. So, I mean, the most memorable sessions were always those with just producing and coming up with the idea of the production and the song, what the song was going to be, because it's just so collaborative. They worked so well together back then. And I love to see when, you know, producers collaborate like that and everybody's just kind of adding their little piece into the gumbo pot, you know, and then you come out with this nice production or what have you. So being able to play actual instruments and not use something that's like virtualized, like there are a lot of virtualized guitar plugins and they sound really good, but sometimes they do sound stiff, sometimes they do sound sterile. And nothing against, you know, clicking in notes. Sometimes I do that myself, just out of ease of use or whatever. But I'll go back and play some real instruments on top, because you need that organicness. You need the music to breathe. You need it to breathe and have a life. So to be able to play a part and actually play the part from beginning to end gives the record more life, because it's going to be little nuances that change throughout that part. Even though it's the same part, you're playing it throughout the whole production. It's going to give it more life. And it's just a little subtle nuance. You can't really pick it out, but you feel it. Most people will feel it. So I would say anybody that's like kind of stuck in the loop, as they say, or what have you, just learn to try to add an extra note in the 8th bar or something to that loop, or add, you know, as it progresses, as you pattern out or arrange your loop throughout like a 2-minute, you know, length or what have you. Just learn to add, okay, I'm going to layer this same part with a different type of instrument, a pad or something. Just add that in underneath. Just tuck it in or what have you. All of that just makes the music breathe and gives life to it. And it just makes it feel so much better and not boring or sterile. I love Kendrick because his producers, his whole production team, the 1500 and Nothing team, Ranch, and also Terrace Martin. I'm a huge fan of Terrace Martin because we're alike, we're similar in that we both play saxophone, we love synth, we love Herbie Hancock, we love jazz. And the way they add like jazz elements to the music, you can hear it in all of Kendrick's music, that it just breathes. It just adds new life to it. It just takes it to a different dimension. It takes it out of that dope, you know, drum loop and just basic beat and just makes it a movie. Anybody that's ever played in a marching band for maybe a high school or a college, you get a band name. So Tic2daToc was my band name at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's who I've been known as, Tic2daToc, who plays all the instruments throughout my career. My PKA is Tic2daToc. If you look on my album credits, it's Tic2daToc. Well, when Tic2daToc came out, I was like, oh man, I got to differentiate because this is like a bigger brand than my brand. I was like, well, you know, my boy used to call me Tic2daToc, so I was like, I'll go with Tic2daToc. And so I had already been kind of using that. And so I just kind of went with Tic2daToc to kind of differentiate a little bit. On TikTok, I was already doing sing-alongs. So I would make instrumental tracks of R&B songs because I love R&B. And I would, you know, TikTok enabled a way for people to duet them so that they can kind of sing along to it on camera. And so I thought that was a cool way for singers. And I would get a lot of singers, like professional singers, background singers, and then your just casual karaoke type singers who would want to engage and sing these songs. So I would strategize around there, like, okay, what song should I pick? You know, popular songs. I figured out that a lot of people like 90s R&B, like that was a big genre. Rihanna was a big artist people like to listen to or, you know, sing songs to. And so I would just strategize what artists, what genres, that sort of thing, and just, you know, go that way. But then I figured out, well, I need another way to kind of have like shorter or smaller content that I can, just kind of whip out really quick because the sing-alongs take a lot of work. And so that's when I started doing like riff challenges, and that's where the "Where Is This From" came from, because I would play maybe a piano part of some song, and people would like guess, oh, that's from so and so song, or Patti LaBelle, or that's Earth, Wind and Fire, or whatever. I was like, well, shoot, how can I make this even bigger and make it last a little longer? Make it a little longer for the platform to reward me. And so that's when I started doing the live looping, which I had been doing live looping before, and just figured, hey, why don't I live loop all of these samples, and just do it as like a "Where Is This From?" And then it's either you're going to know it from the sample, which will be later generations, or you're going to know it from the original song, like from the 60s, 70s, which is going to be older generations. So I figured I can like hit a wide range of audience by doing that, because they're going to talk about, oh, you young whippersnappers don't know anything about this, or oh, you're too old, this is from Kendrick Lamar or whatever. So it starts discourse, and people having discussions, and that's where the real education starts coming in. And people realize, oh, so and so T-Pain did use a sample of Michael Jackson, whatever, and it's kind of edutainment at that point. And so that's how I started getting into the live loop aspect of "Where Is This From?" And the strategy is basically, samples, because that's going to be multiple origins, right? It's like the original record produced by whoever or sung by whoever, and then it's going to be somebody who sampled it, and there might be multiple artists that sampled it. So that's where the strategy kind of plays into it. This is stuff that I would normally do because I enjoy it. So whatever content that you make sure you enjoy it. So it was surprising, and there were several light bulb moments in terms of like just realizing that, okay, older people are engaging in this type of content, or younger people are engaging in this type of content, and just being able, it's almost a game to me in terms of like how can I best make this content be the most impactful. And that comes into like just the skill set of learning and playing the songs. How can I make the content look its best? How can I elevate the content over time? You've seen the content kind of change in certain ways. I added the little wave circles and that sort of thing to the content, which that kind of refreshed it a little bit after some time, so it wasn't stale or what have you. So it's always evolving, ever evolving. But yeah, it was always surprising to me how many people would engage. And sometimes I would pick a song that I thought might be like a big banger. Like I would literally tell myself, I need a banger, like for content, and it would flop, or a song that I thought was gonna flop. I was like, oh, I'll put this out. It's super easy, super simple. And then all of a sudden it's like 2 million views. That happens. And so it's almost like you can't predict, the way the algorithm is going to work or what's actually going to resonate with people. But you just try, and then you just be persistent and consistent is what I always say. You just got to be persist beyond the technical difficulties, because there's tons of technical difficulties. It might be a part that, I can't play that well on guitar, but I just keep at it, hack at it. It's time consuming, but I learn in the process. My skill set gets better in the process. And then at the end of the day, I'm putting out good content, and it's like a win-win for me. The biggest video from that one was, it's got to be the Isley Brothers, "Between the Sheets." And that surprised me because, that's an old song. And yeah, it was sampled by Notorious Big, which I expected it to do something. But it really took off because most of the comments were Thundercat. They know he sampled it or used that beat, that intro beat, for Them Changes, which is a great song. And I actually just met Thundercat's parents. Great people. They had some great stories to tell about them. I won't share them, but yeah, great people. But yeah, that was like the most surprising, because I thought just on it being the Isley Brothers, any Isley Brothers song that I do is going to be big, because it's multiple generations that know the song from either the original or the sample. And then also, Between the Sheets was sampled by Notorious Big and some others or what have you. So I thought that alone, okay, I'll do maybe 1 million or so. But that one went like I made $20,000 off of that one piece of content, so that was like nuts. that blew my mind when that happened. So that was like a big surprise. Sometimes it is definitely a trade-off. If you saw like how my BeatStars was going, and then all of a sudden it started trickling, it's just like, and that's because I had to trade off doing content, which was my main moneymaker, or becoming my main moneymaker, for just doing beats and making sure my beat store was populated. But at the same time, doing the content was driving traffic to my beat store. So it's like, you do have to find a happy medium and balance in the whole thing. It is a lot of work being a content creator and staying current, staying with the trends, so you have a viral video. Well, you have to stay with it, you have to stay consistent and stay in front of people because you got that next big wave, right? So it's a lot of work, and then you trying to balance that, work-life balance with family and that sort of thing. It is difficult. I mean, for a person like me who's used to just being in the studio by yourself and making music, sometimes that's not as hard because I don't have that big of a social life. I have a family, but that's all I need, So, but in the last few years, I've really been trying to break out of that so that I could do more collaborations with people, and I definitely have been doing that, and it's starting to pay off. When you start relying on one thing, like a platform like TikTok, which you have no control over, you don't know if it's going to be here today or tomorrow. I mean, I had already had that in my mind way before the ban was even talked about. So I already knew I needed to figure out something to expand my brand in some type of way, or my services, or what I do as a composer producer. It was basically just going back to my roots of being a composer producer and like, hey, let's go back into creating sync music. So music for sync and that sort of thing, because I had already been in that space and had success there in certain ways or whatever. Because who knows what's going to happen with Meta or TikTok or YouTube even. I've started getting more content on YouTube now or what have you, but you never know what's going to happen with that either. But I know sync is something I know I've had success with before, so it's like, let's get a foothold there. And that's like the, always steady type of thing or what have you, because that publishing money, once you get some placements and stuff, and you put out those things that are synced and licensed and whatnot, that's going to be forever money. You're going to always get that stream, and the more you do, the more it's going to just build on itself, basically. It's always imperative, when you rely on social media for a certain level of success, to engage with them in some sort of way. Make sure they know that they're being seen, that their comments are appreciated. Also, asking them what they like to see from you makes them feel like they're a part of the brand and like they're a part of the movement. So it helps you in the long run because it keeps that engagement going, and then it also gives you ideas that you may not have thought of. Have a clear idea of what you want to do, and make sure that you like doing that thing, because guess what, you got to do it a lot. When it gets hard and tough, you got to stick to it. You have to have stick-to-itiveness, be persistent with it, and be consistent with it. So even though you may not see the effects of it initially, eventually, like I always tell people, there's an audience for everything. So whatever it is that you do it. You lean into it, you be persistent, and you be consistent with it. And eventually time will give you that success that you're looking for.